This is a production of KMmedia.pro. Welcome back to Positive Talk Radio. Our goal is simple: to explore evolving ideas one conversation at a time. So come on over into our world. I know you'll like it, because on today's show, Wednesday afternoon on KKNW, my name is Kevin McDonald, and yes, you're listening to Positive Talk Radio, and we've got a great show for you today. And I know I say that a lot, but today I really mean it. I do. Honestly, I do. And we've got Mitch is with us, and first of all, I got to talk to Eric. How are you, my friend?
Hey, happy Wednesday, Kevin. I'm doing well.
I know. Can you believe that it's almost July already?
I know, next week. And we've got the 4th of July holiday coming up. So
yeah.
Yeah. Are you excited about that? Do you do anything fun for the 4th of July?
No. I had years ago, I had a bad experience on the 4th of July involving a suicide. And so I kind of keep that one low key. Sure.
But it is Independence Day, and didn't you host a show called My Independence Report?
I did. And it was because we were declaring our independence from hate, division, and fear, which is what we're still working to do with Positive Talk Radio. So
perfect. So it seems like you could make some fresh, happy associations with Independence Day.
You sound like my analyst. Yeah. that actually would be a really good idea. But since my dog has passed away now, I don't have to worry about drugging him out because of the fireworks and stuff. But no, as Independence Day is always a good day to remember our country, why we got here, how we got here, and how important it is for us to all maintain our independence.
Yep, the positive things that our country has to offer and the positive things that we could hopefully move towards in the future if we keep on pushing for that.
Exactly. Now, I did want to ask you, off the top of your head, could you tell me how many countries you visited in your lifetime?
Sure. Let's see.
Can you count them on one hand?
Probably about 5.
Oh, very nice.
Exactly on one hand.
Well,
how about yourself?
Our guest, well, I've 3.
3? That's pretty good. And made it outside our borders, I think, is always positive.
Exactly. And one of them was in Tijuana, Mexico, and I don't want to ever go back there again. It's scary.
All right. So I'm guessing you've been to Mexico, Canada, and the U.S.
and the United States. Yeah. That's it.
Broaden your horizons.
My son is in London, England, and so I may have to go there.
Yeah, go visit.
But the problem is, Eric, I want to go to Liverpool, but the problem is that they drive on the wrong side of the street.
Well, you don't have to drive, Kevin.
I don't? Oh.
No.
Well, I know, but I can't imagine. See, weren't we originally British colonies? How come they drive on the wrong side of the street and we were once one people long ago before the independence?
Well, I hate to blow your mind, but I believe the car was invented after we became separate nations.
Well, but does that mean that when they were on horseback years ago, did they drive on the wrong side of the street then too?
I think everybody was down the middle at that point, but
well, I guess so. Well, let's ask Mitch how many countries he's been to, and I know he's been to at least 2, the United States and Hawaii. Wait, that's not right.
I think Hawaii is a state now, but at one point was its own country.
Indeed. Mitch, are you there?
Yeah. Is my video working?
It looks like you've frozen up there, Mitch. You might want to turn up your air conditioning or turn down your air conditioning.
Yeah, no kidding. Let me. Should I do the stop camera and redo it, or
you could try that? Sure.
Let's see if that works.
Okay. Well,
goodness.
It'll catch up to us here.
What a terrible face.
We've got a nice picture, at least, of Mitch for this conversation. We can hear him. That's the important thing.
Well,
There you
the beautiful thing about radio is that in the past that you could visualize in your own mind based upon the voice of the person that you're listening to. So now we get to find out that we get to fantasize in our own mind what Mitch is doing over there and what he looks like because we can't see him.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying, but
Well, so Mitch, tell me, how many countries have you been to?
well, if you include the one I live in, I've only visited 2 other countries besides the US. So and that's Canada and Mexico.
Ah, me too, and Hawaii. No, never mind. That's wrong. That's
I know it's a little far from the mainland, but it is a part of the US, Kevin.
yeah. It was a silly
So is
joke.
Alaska, in case you were wondering.
Exactly. Well, you know what? Our guest today, his name is John Taylor McEntire, and he's visited or worked in 40 different countries around the world. That's
Wow.
almost like a third of all the countries. So let's go ahead and welcome John onto the show. John, how are you?
Doing really good. Thanks
Good.
for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. You have done a lot in your. By the way, that's Mitch down there. You can't see him anymore. But
I'm having some video technical difficulties. I apologize, John. Nice to meet you.
he'll show up sooner or later.
Incognito here, huh?
Yeah.
Exactly. So John, I'm glad you're here because you've worked in Japan, spent 5 years in Japan, as a matter of fact, and ran some companies there. You worked in Thailand, and you've also been in Qatar, and you're still working for a company in Qatar, but you've also got your own thing there you are, Mitch. Welcome back.
I had to get out and back in. Sorry, guys.
Great to see you, Mitch.
Great to see you too, John.
And you've also started your own company of late, which is called Mutual Prosperity. And that's kind of what we wanted to focus on today. But I also wanted to talk to you about East-West philosophy and what you've seen around the world in all of the countries that you've been to in your career. Can you first of all give us kind of a short bio as to what you've done and who you've done it with? And not all of that, just professionally.
First of all, just one correction. It wasn't Thailand, it was Taiwan, that
I knew I'd
I
get that
had lived
wrong.
in. Yeah, no problem, no problem. But I have been to Thailand too, but not there, living and working. Um, so uh, um, I don't know exactly where to start, but I grew up with lots of cultures and everything around me. A family of 5 kids, but we always had stragglers in our house, and we had 2 foster Indian brothers, and they were with us during the school year and learned a lot from them. We had um, international exchange students from Germany and Japan and other places. We had a lady and her baby from Uruguay that lived with us, and my parents were just really, you know, making sure that we understood that everybody was really important, and so I grew up with that in the background. And every year we would travel someplace in the state one year, and then the next year we would travel someplace internationally. And so that became kind of a thing, and that kind of what made me who I am in regards to really being interested in other cultures, other people's food, what other people think, and everything. And so that's how I kind of became, you know, in this state of who I am, and why I do the things that I do and everything.
Well, I'll tell you, I know you spent 5 years in Japan. My son, who's in the Air Force, is currently stationed in England, but he was in Japan and now they want to go back. And the principal reason that they want to go back is because of the food that they have there is, in his mind, far superior to what he can get in England and stuff. In fact, Mitch, and I don't know, I did not know this. I still don't know the name of it, but there is a particular steak that they have in Japan that are
Wagyu?
you I'm sorry?
Wagyu.
That's it. That's it. Are you familiar
Yep,
with that,
Wagyu.
Mitch?
Yeah, Japanese Wagyu, it's extremely expensive. I want to say like close to $100 or more for just a regular old steak. Like we have Wagyu over here, but it's not I'm not sure with the why or the how they probably prep it maybe differently. The Japanese Wagyu is definitely I've never tried it. Something very expensive and supposed to be delicious.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's mouth watering. It just melts in your mouth. It's so good. But there's different grades of Wagyu. And so if you have the highest grade, then it's actually gets even higher than the $100 for a steak and everything. But they can go into the couple hundreds of dollars for a steak.
What is that, tenderloin, or what part of the cow does the top grade come from?
Well, what it is it's actually all different cuts of meat. It's actually how the cow is raised. Um, they raise it with a special diet, and it includes beer. And so the beer actually breaks up the fat cells. Okay, so the fat cells are actually throughout the whole piece of meat, which makes it more tender and more delicious.
I keep trying that with beer, and it doesn't break up fat cells at all in a human.
Yeah, kind of does the opposite. I don't know how they do it with the cows, but they're able to do that somehow.
Oh, that's
John, are you a cook on the side?
I love cooking, but I'd have to agree with Kevin's son that Japan has probably some of the best food in the world. Uh, they every type of food that you can get in the world, you have it in Japan, and you have some of the best and the highest quality there. Now, the other thing is that I don't know if Kevin knew this, if we talked about this before, but my wife is Japanese, and she is just an incredible cook, and so she keeps us fat and happy, and keeps us going and everything. But everything she makes um, is just incredible. And in fact, in the times that where I was working, like just recently in Qatar, um, uh, I would go on business trips and stuff, and sometimes she would go with me. Like she went to Thailand with me, and while I'm in my conference or in the meetings and such, she goes and does you know uh, cooking classes, and so she actually learns from the locals how to cook their food, and she comes back and treats us to lots of delicacies and everything. So we're really spoiled.
Well, I gotta say, first of all, I think your parents are phenomenal for what they did. Taking in foster kids and having exchange students and having a full house all the time, and giving you the experience of meeting different types of people. I think that's really important. So they're special people.
Well, one of the other things about different types of people, I mean, we had my dad would come home sometimes, and he'd have somebody with him, and that person he found on the highway, and they're a drug addict or whatever. Or at times he would take me to like the prison, and we would actually go and just talk to people. And he really instilled in me that everybody really has value, and it's not everybody has found their value yet, or they haven't had the opportunities to get that. And that's kind of like my philosophy in regards to how we try and pull that out of people.
Well, you're doing a fabulous job with it, and especially with Mutual Prosperity, which is the company that you're working with now. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that evolved into what it is today?
Well, it's a fusion of diverse business and cultural experiences, which focus on the values of transparency, authenticity, creativity, and inclusion, and pride in individual and group activity. And this kind of comes from my work in high technology. So I work for research institutions, and I help them take the research results that come from billions of dollars of research activity, and those research results, they need to be determined if they're something valuable for public consumption. And so ultimately, I review those technologies, determine if they're patentable, if there's something that's marketable, and then help them go forward. But in doing this, I've always found that the organizations that I work with, they don't really understand that plight of that technology transfer manager. And that's what it's called, is technology transfer. And and it's really important for people to understand this technology transfer thing. So if you have your iPhone or your um, your Android, a lot of the apps in those phones actually came from different organizations, for the GPS and the touch screen and all those things came from technology transfer. In fact, one of the largest companies in the world is a technology transfer success, and that's Google. That came from Stanford. And so there's just a lot of activity. A lot of the drugs and medication that we get come from organizations that work in the biotech sphere and do this bio related research. Anyway, these organizations who are really tied into understanding, education is their number one goal, and then research kind of sits on the side of that. Um, and the research sits on the side because education is not really complete unless you actually have a mechanism for people to actually learn what they've studied. And they have to learn it with hands-on experience by actually doing the research, and then the research actually has results. But what these organizations don't often understand is that what comes from those results is meant to be beneficial for society, and that's why Congress allows money to come in. There's what's called the Bayh-Dole Act in the U.S. Was put in place in 1980, and that's what requires these institutions to actually take on the ownership of these intellectual property, these ideas, make sure that they're protected with intellectual property, with patents and copyrights and trademarks and such, and that they can be marketed and then further developed to actually be something beneficial for the public. So these organizations, which understand education and research, they don't understand this kind of redheaded stepchild, and it's often confusing for them. So my goal is always to help them understand how that plays into the main goals of the university, which is really one of their main criteria is actually to make things useful to the public. So in doing this, there's a couple things that happen. The office doesn't often get the resources that it needs to actually do the further technology development. And without that technology development funding and that investment in those activities, it's not really going to go anyplace. And so there, you need to get buy-in. And so it's really important that you understand who the players are in your realm. And what I do is I call them the orbs of influence. And these orbs of influence would be like the person that I report to as the director of the technology transfer office. That person would normally be the vice president for research or the vice chancellor for research. And if that technology transfer director and that vice president aren't on the same page, then things are really not going to work out. But usually they're on the same page. They understand how technology transfer fits in that whole mission of the research engine and research and development. So then you have people who have to work alongside that, which I call support collaborative contributors, and that would be like general counsel. So the attorney for the institution needs to actually kind of come and play, and that attorney then um, has to. Of course, they're involved with all the legal aspects, but because the tech transfer office is dealing with two legal things. One is the intellectual property protection, so patents and copyrights, and dealing with the patent attorneys and things like that, but also with licensing. And so the licensing is agreement and a contract. And so those things need to get buy-in from the general counsel. So there needs to be a good relationship there. Then there's people that are supportive, and that would be like the vice president for finance, or the person ahead of HR and the person of head of communications. And these people often have a hard time to understand what the technology transfer office needs to do. And so it's really important to kind of get them to understand that so that we're all on the same page and speaking the same language. And this is one of the main things that I try to deal with is, even though somebody is in an office next to you, it doesn't mean, or your neighbor next to you, doesn't mean that you speak the same language. You have different cultural things that you've learned throughout time, and you have a different language in regards to how you grew up or how you were trained, how you were educated, what type of field you're in. And so somehow we need to get people on the same page. And then once you're on the same page and speaking the same language, then you can start saying, hey, what I do helps you and what you do helps me. So let's kind of work together and make that happen. So that's kind of the big overall picture of what I do. And I call myself an innovation ecosystem enabler. And so basically, I'm enabling the organizations to get better results from this activity and technology transfer. Now, that's the big picture. But then you have your own office that you have to deal with. And so I have all these people that are dealing with the patent attorneys, or it's the administration staff, technology transfer, the technology managers, people dealing with the database, and people dealing with marketing and all these things. And these people often feel out of the loop. So people in underneath us, if we're not pulling them along and helping them um, to to see that they're part of the process, then they're going to feel alienated, and ultimately they're not going to perform as well as they need to for the whole activity to happen. So um, the one reason why the travel activities were so important to me, in me becoming who I am, and recognizing that everybody has a value, is that, and at the Cutter Foundation, I worked with people from 39 different countries, and uh, and that's just a lot of different cultures, a lot of different types of thinking and everything, and so that even brought another complex issue into play there. So it's not just the organization itself, it's not just that working with the hierarchy, it's not just working with the people inside, but it's also working with the cultural and the language aspects that come into play.
You know, if you're like me, you can replay this by going to positivetalkradio.net, because I caught about half of that, 2/3 of that. But and I needed to miss you. I'm sure you're younger than me. You're more technology friendly. I'm sure you caught more of that than I did.
I caught I caught a bunch of it. I mean, yeah, there's a lot. So what John is saying, a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved to make this successful, which also is more, more respectable. I mean, just it's hard work. It sounds, what you do is, it's not easy, but it's also very exciting, and it's a big part of, moving forward and kind of what we need to do. Like you said, everybody getting on the same page to make it work. So that's really cool, John. I appreciate you sharing that.
Would it
Thank
be
you. So, hmm?
would it be fair to say that you are what I would call a master communicator?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a master communicator, because lots of things that I need to work on, but I try to understand people, and help them recognize that they're valuable, and that the organization that we have is valuable to the larger organization and everything. So if you take the technical aspects out of my daily work, okay, and the aspects of this research university activity, if you take it out of that, and let's put it into a school, or into a church, or into a community, um, uh, it all plays together in regards to who are the players, who are the orbs of influence, how do they communicate with each other, and what part do they play, and then how can you make sure that they all feel a part of the whole, so that their individual parts are not just something that they're doing their work, but they're actually enmeshed, and they're woven together, and able to actually make people work together. So when you did the opening in the show today, I you and I are on the same thinking, and that is that positive talk radio is really trying to get the negativity out. It's trying to get people on the same page. It's trying to get people actually recognizing that everybody is needed. Everybody's got something to do, and something that is useful for society. Yeah, one of the things that I think is really interesting is that uh, when you look at the different jobs that are out there right now, and what's happened in the last couple years with COVID-19, we had a lot of people that kind of quit their jobs for lots of different reasons, and so the workforce itself is missing a lot of people who have great expertise in their spaces, and ultimately we're going to see that people who are who remove our trash, people who are plumbers, people who are in the trades are going to actually become even more important than they are today because there's not very many people going into those spaces. And that's partly because a lot of people have been told over, generations that you need to get a college education, you need to, do the regular job and everything. But, you know, nobody should fit into um, one way of doing things, one mode of doing things, because that way we miss out on people actually being able to prove themselves uh, valuable because they're actually doing something that somebody else can't do or somebody else doesn't want to do. And so that's why it's so important that we actually bring everybody together and help people see that, in order to make the whole that much greater, each one's got to actually do their individual part, and we've got to let them do their part in the way that they can do it best. And we need to acknowledge the fact that they're doing a good job and that they're needed. And that way we can actually get people enmeshed with each other and get society back on a track where we're thinking more positively about what each other has to give and why that's so important, why that's so necessary.
The society can't run if it doesn't have people in all phases of things doing all manners of work. I'll give you an example. My son, he went to diesel mechanic school in the trades, and now he is a high rise mechanic that is highly sought after because there ain't no such animal. They don't make those things anymore, and his a lot of his contemporaries are in their 50s or beyond and are tired. And so if you have a son or daughter and they don't really want to go to college, send them to trade school, for heaven's sakes. They can make a heck of a living doing that. And
Absolutely.
if they love doing something like that, Mitch, I'm going to have you send us to break, but before we go to break, I got a question for you, because John lived in Qatar for 5 years. Now, when we
nine
come
nine
back, I'm sorry, what?
9 years.
Oh, sorry. I
Yes.
undercut him again. So for
No
9
problem.
years. But I would like you to tell me, if you were to take $100,000, put it into a briefcase, were you more likely to get robbed in the United States or Qatar? When we come back from this, I'll have John give us the answer to that.
All right. All of our amazing listeners out there, we got John Taylor McEntire, founder of Mutual Prosperity. You are listening to Positive Talk Radio, and we are going to hear more from John here shortly in the next couple minutes. Stay tuned.
Hey, PTR loyal listener. First, thanks for being in my dream. And second, I have a new concept in business to share with you. It's called socialpreneurship. So, what's that? Well, it's the idea that any company designates all profits, beyond expenses, to be awarded to a local or international charity or project which is working to achieve good in the world. KM Media is such a company. We believe that it's important for us to give back whenever possible and to make great things happen. So I hope you'll join us in creating this new business model that will positively impact all of us. In the next few weeks, we will lay out the plan and begin our fundraising efforts. So stay tuned for more details right here on Positive Talk Radio.
When you want to say more than words communicate, you can with flowers. Your custom boutique floral studio in Bothell, Washington is anaturaldesign.com, connecting you to nature through the language of flowers. Where your people are is where our flowers are beautiful. Your success is our goal. anaturaldesign.com at your fingertips today.
Hey, thanks for listening to Positive Talk Radio. Did you know that we're also a media production company? Well, surprise, we are. We can create all kinds of audio, video products to fill any need. Please visit kmmedia.pro/our-store for a complete list of products and services. In addition, do you need a great voice to add to your own website or any other project? I know that we can add depth and quality to your work. I've been told more times than I can count by many professionals in the business that my voice adds to the quality of the presentation. So, let me create something for you. Please contact me at kevin@kmmedia.pro and let's create something great. And welcome back, everybody, to Positive Talk Radio. My name is Kevin McDonald, and John Taylor McEntire is our guest today. And Mitch has disappeared. I don't know where he went, but hopefully he'll come back at one point in time. But that's what happens when you do technology. Sometimes it doesn't work the way we'd hoped it would. So in any event, John, welcome to the show. And I know welcome back, I should say. You have lived in and worked in many, many different environments, many economic places, many social differences in around the world. Be it from Japan, they have a different view of life in the world than maybe Qatar or maybe other places. Do you find that even though we are so different and our cultures are so different, that we can all get along?
No, absolutely. The cultural differences are what make us interesting to each other. As long as we don't let it be irritating, but we need to be, open to understanding, that other people think differently than we do. Um, uh, I mean, I wouldn't be who I am today without having had these different experiences, but everybody can say that in regards to, the neighbors that they have, the people that they went to school with and everything. And of course, we're more comfortable with those that are like us, okay, or those that we grew up with and everything. But um, when you step outside of your realm, you take this mystique of what you think about another culture and other people, and you that diminishes, and ultimately it comes down to people are people no matter where they are, and that they're all valuable, and somehow you know we become better because of those experiences.
Now, in your experience in all of these countries, what do you think is, well, describe, if you will, the differences between an Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy?
So a Western philosophy is more independent, the free thinker, the individual. That's really important. You see that in the United States, of course, but all over North America. That's kind of permeated, especially in the United States and Canada. So that individualistic, the cowboy, those people, those types of activities, that type of thinking is what made America what it is today. When you get into the East, and we're talking about, like the Orient, you get into where more cultural aspects are really related to the community and communal type issues, and how do you build consensus, and how do you pull these different groups together? How do you make it so that um, the population of Tokyo, which is the largest city in the world, um, uh, how do you get all these people to actually work well together, live well together? And these people are living in very, very small places.
Mhm.
And in the West, we sometimes call them rabbit hutches, um, but they're really small, and the walls are thin and everything. But how do these people actually live together? Well, they learn that they need to recognize that they have value, but others have value too, and that somehow we need to make it work so that everybody feels like they're part of the that apartment complex, or they need to be feel a part of the community. And so you do that by giving of yourself, and it's more group mentality.
In the Eastern philosophy, do they value family more than we do in the West, and multi generational spaces where they're living together, grandparents and kids and grandkids and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. In fact, it's very common, and I think it's becoming even more common. But I think we're seeing more of that activity happen in the U.S., especially during, from COVID and everything, where people had to move in with their families and maybe jobs were lost or whatnot. People, in transition and everything. Um, so um, what so the fact that they live with their families is very interesting. So, I'll just talk about my own experience. When we got married, my wife and I got married. I was at school in the U.S., and then my I promised my father-in-law, who's in Tokyo, that when I got done with school, that we would move to Japan. So we moved to Japan, but the first 6 months we actually lived with them, and we had our oldest son, Jeffrey, at the time, and it was actually a very interesting experience, a very different way of living than how I grew up and everything. Actually didn't have a bath in their house. They had a toilet and the sink and everything, but the bath, they went to the communal bath and in the community, and so that was like very different for me, coming from the States, and where we tend to cover ourselves up, and those types of things are private and whatnot. But that communal uh, element is it permeates the country, uh, you know, uh, very dramatically in those types of ways. But when I was at the bath, and even with my father-in-law and my son and my brother-in-law, um, you get to know people, and those things are not embarrassing anymore, and you have a kinship and everything in regards to that. So that's just one little example and everything. But I think there's another part in the East, and this actually goes from not just Asia, but also from Asia, talking about like Japan, China, Taiwan, Korea, and those countries. You go from there and you go into the Middle East, and Israel, the Arab states, and everything. Um, Peace is a very important aspect. So you have shalom in Israel, and you have uh, you know all these different aspects of peace, Heiwa in Japan and whatnot. This aspect of peace is actually the communal type thing. So peace means that we're collectively working together, and we don't have that same concept of peace in the West, as much, because we have this individualistic type tendencies and everything, and that's not necessarily that it's out of our mind. It's just that that individualistic aspect is very important. So somehow, as the Western part of the world has been enamored with things that come from the East, and we have people, doing yoga and all these different things which actually help people to bring peace into their lives. We're seeing a meshing of these different types of cultures and different types of thinking coming together.
I think that's a wonderful thing. By the way, Mitch has returned. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I apologize, John. I don't know. Computer, as soon as I took us to commercial, completely shut down. I was hoping to have it back up by the time it was over,
No
but I
problem.
was not successful.
It happens. It's
Well,
happened to me too. So
yeah, well, and the question that I posed before we went to
Yeah.
break, which was if you were to take $100,000 cash, and John enlightened me as to this, because he said that. Well, I'll have him tell the story, but if you were to take $100,000 in a briefcase and go in any major city in the United States, would you be as safe as you are in Qatar? And John, tell us the answer to that.
so I'm gonna do it with a precursor, just to say when we first when I first accepted the job to go to Qatar, um, my friends and family members, they were just saying, "What in the world are you doing? You're going to the place where these terrorists are, and uh, and it's just not going to be safe, and you're really not valuing your life the way you need to." And what's actually very interesting is it was completely the opposite of what people think. And when we moved over there, we had, of course, we needed to buy a car, and so um, I had at this time 9 years ago, they actually didn't have, not every company could do bank transfers, okay, for payments and everything. So we had bought this car from a smaller dealership, and ultimately I got a loan out of from the bank, and I had to take this cash, and it was, close to $100,000 for the car, and I had to take it in a taxi, and I was really 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 nervous, and I was just clutching that bag and everything, and I think that the taxi driver was just kind of thinking I'm kind of odd and everything. Well, anyway, we bought the car. I have my own car, and then I had our two youngest children. We have six children, but the two youngest went with us to Doha. They were still in high school and junior high, and so I had because I had to use the car for my work. We had a driver for them, and the driver is a great guy. Ahmed, who is a really good friend of ours, became a really good friend of ours from Sri Lanka, and so I was telling him about this story that I felt so, like I was going to lose this money and whatnot, and he says, "Oh, that's nothing." He goes, "You have people, carrying millions or tens of millions of dollars in their briefcases, all the time, and it's not an issue." So during this 9 years that I was there, I noticed that that the safety in the states, particularly in large cities like New York and San Francisco and Los Angeles, Seattle, even, that the safety was actually diminishing as time was going on, and as I was going to meetings or conferences and everything, I felt less safe there than I did in other places in the world. And it was very, very uh, interesting because I grew up in the US, and of course, the US, I understand, the safety factor and everything, or I thought I did. But you get those vibes, the heebie-jeebies or whatever, and that really, that hair going up in the back of your neck and everything, you're not in a safe place. And I never felt that when I was in Doha or any part of the Middle East, for that re that for that uh, part. Um, but there is a safety factor that we need to be thinking about, and it's not the same. And now people may say that, well, it's the Middle East, um, it's Arab state, it's Islam, and they have, uh, high what activities related to, if you steal or whatnot. That is part of it, but you could leave. Um, uh, so when we lived in Japan, there was times when people would leave their wallet or whatever, on the train, it would get lost and stuff, and it would come back to them, everything in it. And I would say the same thing would happen in Doha. It did happen in Doha. And so nobody was actually thinking that somebody else's stuff could become my stuff. But it's very different, in the States. You're likely not going to get your stuff back, okay, depending on where you are. And lots of places in Middle America, maybe it's different, but a lot of the bigger cities, it's highly likely that could get stolen.
A couple things about that. First of all, Mitch, have you ever gone to a convenience store and right there on the front door it says, "Cashier has no more than $20 cash," and they do that to prevent from people saying, "Well, I don't want to go to jail for $20." But think about that car dealer. You had taken $100,000 to that car dealer, and if that's the common way of they operate over there, everybody knew that there was cash there, and nobody came and took his money. So that's I think we in the United States have got a great deal to learn from other cultures. Mitch, what do you think?
Well, yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, one, I was like, wow, so like the 007 movies are a little truthful, when you show them walking around these briefcases full of money. I'm like, who would do that? I mean, I don't live in a bad area at all. And I mean, if I had $100,000 in a briefcase in my house, I would be nervous. just having
Yeah.
that much money and cash in general. Because I mean, it's and the mentality behind that is that, I mean, it's, if somebody were to, God forbid, come in the house, just grab that briefcase. I mean, that's a large amount of money gone. I can't imagine walking around with that anywhere in the world. So it's super super interesting to hear about. But I do, like, I agree with you, Kevin. I think we do have a lot to learn, about those things. We have a lot of fear over here around. And I mean, if I left my wallet somewhere, whether it was anywhere, if I left it and and it'd been more than 5 minutes, I'd be like, oh, it's gone. Like, that's where my mind would go anyway. And I would hope for the best, but it's scary. So that's interesting. I never knew that.
I was a bus driver for 12 years, and there were more than one time when I would be driving my bus, and there would be a lady sitting by the back door, perhaps, with her purse on her lap, and just waiting to get off at her stop, and the doors would open, and a guy would grab her purse and run out the door, and that's not an uncommon thing in this country, and it's I
Yeah.
it just struck me, John, and I would love your opinion on this, is that does our desire to be independent and independent from each other, independent from other things, does that cause us in some ways to not be as helpful to one another because we don't care, or because they're not part of our tribe, or what do you think that is?
That's a really good question. I think it's lots of things. I think it's the way our education system is set up. I do think there's something to do with the individuality and everything where, and it's really rampant right now when we have these, very diverse, everybody's on the opposite pole and everything. Somehow, what I think is more important than what you think, um, where we actually need to get some more communal values in there and understand that everybody brings some value to the place. And even if we don't think they bring value, we need to figure out how we get them understand how they bring value. Um, I think having some type of common understanding of the people that live next door and the people that live down the block and the people that live in a different type of area than you. Um, we need to not keep ourselves so separate from them, but somehow become more enmeshed. I was really taken by your the advert for the people that were putting the food boxes together and everything. I mean, that's what we need to be doing more of, and getting people to understand and help each other. And I think if we figure out how we can get people to understand that by helping other people, we're helping ourselves, because we get in a society where we're actually um, creating a unified voice. I mean, I'm a real proponent. I mean, we were talking about Independence Day and everything, and I'm a real proponent of um, uh, what you know what what happens if I actually step outside my box and listen to what somebody else is saying, and then how do I take what they're saying and mesh it with what I think, and even though they may be polar opposites, how do we recognize where each other is adding value? And that comes back to the question you asked me before, is even though we were in a different culture and everything, um, sometimes we need to pull ourselves out of our regular thinking, and even the person next door to us, somehow we need to figure out where we're more common than we're separate or different. And I think the commonalities actually are so much more important. And actually, there's a lot more commonalities than there are differences. It's just we've made those differences be so important, and we need to get that peace that they have in the East, and we need to be able to get that peace by helping people understand that we care about them, and we want to, you know, make them whole by making ourselves whole and making the group actually work in a way that that makes the group whole. And that's how we actually make society better. So going back to Independence Day and how we got our independence and everything. I mean, it's united we stand, divided we fall. And I think we forget that. And that's where we're at right now. We're at the falling state, and we need to actually pull ourselves back together and unify and actually become, you know, a country of like-minded people in most things, and have our differences that actually bring the flavor out to make it interesting for all of us.
You know, John, that is a wonderful statement, wonderful sentiment, because that's what we believe here. And, you know, Mitch, I didn't understand half of what he does for a living, but I understand what he just said. How about you?
No, definitely. I wanted to say I couldn't agree with you more, John. I think what we need more of is what we do is, whether it's our neighbor or we see somebody out somewhere, is instead of thinking about what we have in common or how we're alike, we sit there and we analyze how we're different. And whether that's beliefs, physical, anything. And I think that people need to try to, and it's a little bit of a mindset thing, but it's, taking that step back and whether it's, like you said, it's your neighbor or somebody like that. It's like, what similarities do we have? What do we have that's in common? And just that mentality is, you're associating just a connection, and it is a bringing together mindset versus the thinking about how we're different and focusing on that, like, oh, well, that person does this and I don't do that, versus what do they do that I also do, kind of thing. So I couldn't agree with you more. I was really happy to hear you have that talk track, just what you said. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you.
And, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
My oldest son, we had a situation where we had in a place where we lived, we had a neighbor who um, had a kid that was allergic to bees and everything, and they actually cut down our lavender bushes, and and I was so mad, my wife was so mad, and we'd had a really hard time, forgiving this person, even though we haven't addressed this because we weren't in the country at the time, and and my son said something that just struck me, and he says, well, you know what I think you need to do, Dad? I think you need to take a plate of cookies. Okay. And that just gets back to, okay, well, here's the type of stuff that I do trying to bring groups together. And then I'm letting something divide me from the people who live next to me, which, at some point I may need them. And they may need me, and we need each other to make sure the neighborhood's nice. And so I think taking a plate of cookies is actually probably the right thing to do. And so somehow we give of ourselves, and we ultimately give back, and or we receive back by having this quilt of all these different people woven together in a way that is not tattered.
I couldn't agree more. You know, I spent years in a cul-de-sac. There were 11 houses in this cul-de-sac, and everybody, to a person, would drive into the cul-de-sac, raise their garage door, drive into the garage, shut the garage door, and never be seen again until they had to leave to go in the car again. We never knew who our neighbors were. Couldn't tell you who. I couldn't pick them out of a lineup, and that's just not a great way to be.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And so, but Mitch, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Is there any questions that you have that you would like to ask John?
I do have one question.
Okay.
What car were you buying with that $1,000?
Well,
it's been stuck in my head this whole time. I have to know.
So it was not totally $100,000, but there was the taxes and everything that went with it. But buying a car in the U.S. is very cheap in comparison to buying something anywhere else. Okay. Cars are just really expensive. They're taxed high and everything. It was actually a Nissan Armada, but it was fully loaded. Okay. And had all the video stuff and in the seats, leather, totally loaded. But that's what it was. It's the same car in the States would probably have been about $50,000-$60,000. And
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah.
Those are nice cars, though. I remember
Yeah,
I've been in one that has the videos and the head seat, or for the kids in the back, and they're big. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like Nissan's full size SUV is those big Armadas.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
Well, thanks.
Mhm.
Whatever happened to the days when the kids just sat in the back seat and looked out the window? I
With
miss those
with no
days.
seatbelts on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we
Before
didn't even
seatbelts.
have we didn't even
We
have
didn't even have
seatbelts.
seatbelts. No.
Do you
It
know?
was your dad's hand.
Yeah. Just
Yeah, yeah.
real quick story. When I was in Little League and I was 10 years old, we would walk up to a couple of blocks and my coach would pick us up. He had a convertible that was like from the 1950s. And so it was a convertible. You have the convertible, the back down, and we would sit on the edge of with our feet on the seat of the back seat and sit on the edge of it like 5 across. And nobody said a word. And you know what? We're all still here.
Um, so I have a story like that. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon, and he was the doctor for a lot of the sports teams in the area I grew up in. And he had a little, it wasn't an expensive car, but it was a Porsche 914. And so we had this. It's
Up,
a two-seater. We had 7
John.
people in the seat. So anyway, in one seat of that car, so it was just crazy.
John, I'm so sorry. We run out of time and I've got to go. But thank you, Mitch. Thank you,
Yeah.
John. And be kind to everybody because each other's always. Oh, I was going to.
It's like the Oscars. We talked too long.
I was flustered.
Take your award, walk up.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.